Keep in mind, old Baldy here took money from FTX, from Sam Bankman fraud, and promoted the scam, even though he should have the financial literacy to have looked into it. And then even whenever Sam got convicted or indicted, this dude is still running defense for him.
But are some students about to get an education they maybe didn't bargain for when the protests began? Well, that's a question that some, CEOs are now appearing to answer. Just listen, for example, to this warning by ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods when he was asked if the turmoil on these campuses will actually impact who his company even hires.
What we're seeing on campuses today in some places is something very different from that, harassment and intimidation. I think there's no place for that, frankly, at those universities, and certainly no place for that in a company like ExxonMobil. So we wouldn't look to bring folks like that into our company, and if that action or those protests reflect the values of the campuses where they're doing it, we wouldn't be interested in recruiting students from those campuses.
I mean, that might be surprising or not surprising to you. Woods, though, isn't alone. I mean, you have hedge fund founder Daniel Loeb telling the New York Post, quote, "We're looking for high-quality candidates, but we're going to be looking at
This
different
part's irrelevant.
places." The CEO of an
This
executive...
is every company is going to say this, right? It's not a big deal. It's about how they're figuring out who's doing it.
search firm tells the Post, quote, "I'm hearing from people they don't want to send their kids to these places, but also from the banks that they're leery about recruiting now from these highly visible schools and will look to places maybe in the Midwest where you don't see this type of activity." Of course, you are seeing some of this on different campuses all across the nation. But is this just a bluff from corporate America? Or might they be serious this time? Well, joining me now, Shark Tank judge Kevin O'Leary is also the chairman of O'Leary Ventures. Good to see you, Kevin, as we're watching all of this unfold. And I want to lean into your experience as a longtime businessman. You've hired thousands of people over the course of your career. And I'm really intrigued about what corporate America's response might be. Would involvement in protests like these, for example, would it deter you from hiring some young adults from any of these schools?
He's going to say yeah.
So I'm agnostic to brands. I would hire from UCLA. I would hire from Columbia. It doesn't matter. The hiring decision is an individual decision. It's an individual basis. And
That's
so what I don't think
makes a good point.
we are talking enough about is a tragedy occurring at the individual level right now. When these protests occurred in the past, and by the way, there have been...
Now, this is my opinion on this shit. I think what people do on their free time is their business. This idea now where you are 24/7 a representative of your company and they're like watching and keeping track of everything that you do. If you think about it, let's go ahead and take a step back. And let's think about there's like the facial recognition technology and everything about this. Think about if in 1980, a company wanted to monitor an employee and they hired people to follow them around and record everything that they said and every private conversation they had and film where they went, what their political viewpoints are, and then use that as leverage into hiring or changing what they're doing. I think that everybody would think this is insane stalker behavior. So just because it's not happening by that design doesn't mean it's not happening by that effect. This is what's happening, and it's getting worse. Because this technology is going to keep getting better. It's going to be getting better like exponentially. I agree, but their actions do affect the company? No, they don't. No, this idea that if you work at a company and you are some random employee at a company, that you have to make sure that every action represents ExxonMobil in a good way, this is outrageous. They don't own you. They pay you to do a job. That is insane.
Student protests since America was formed, and we allow free speech and Protests have been part of it, and you think about the 60s and the 70s, Vietnam War, and all of the protests that have occurred. Most of those were shot on 16mm film. The majority, 80–90% of that was high grainy. You can't really get any resolution. But unfortunately, for these participants in the last few weeks, that's not the case. And let me explain it. It's being shot on 1080p and 4K video, and from surveillance cameras with extremely high resolution in low light conditions, including retinal scanning. This is what's happened with AI. So if you're burning down something or taking a flag down or fighting with police, I'm sorry, you're trashing your personal brand. And let me explain how this works.
And that's a problem. I think that's a massive problem, because who decides what trashing is? This is so scary to me. I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think this is incredibly fucking scary. And like in a lot of cases, I think that it makes sense that like people wouldn't want to hire somebody who's committing crimes, etc. But at the same time, I know, like, I have a lot of friends that growing up, these friends made bad decisions, and because of those bad decisions, they're, they went to jail or they got convicted of something or whatever. And what happened was that afterwards, they couldn't get a job. So it's like, if you're going to give somebody a scarlet letter that's going to say, you can't get a job anywhere, this is going to destroy your future job prospects indefinitely, why not just kill him? Just do that. Just shoot him. If you're going to do this, and you're going to give them this fucking, this indelible sin that they did, that they can never live down, just shoot them. Don't fucking do this to people. Make them live their whole life with this problem, and then they can never overcome it. It's awful. I don't want to work with a criminal. You're not working with a criminal, because if they were a criminal, they'd still be in jail. They paid their debt to society. The debt is paid. They've already done it. If they're still a threat and they're still a criminal, then they shouldn't be out in public.
Works. When I'm hiring somebody, and I'm not different than any other corporation, you just heard from the S&P 500 CEOs, we do what's called a deep, dark search. So if you're a candidate in the executive element of a company or any candidate of materiality, you do this. You look at their resume and you say, let's hire a firm. It's about $4,800 per search, and go deep
web,
than the government. Go dark web. All of this imagery that you're seeing tonight, all of this unedited film, is going to be there in about 2 weeks. So if you're out there right now, even in the dark, with no sunglasses on, even though you've got a mask on.
I don't know, like, I'm not sure what tools that he's talking about and what firms do that. As far as I know, there are not a lot of firms that use AI facial recognition technology to cross-reference against a database of individuals. I think that's something that happens in like China, but I'm pretty sure that no investigation firm does that here, as far as I know, other than like maybe the FBI. So, I'm not sure about this, but let's assume, by the way, they might not do it right now, but everybody, let's all agree that it will happen in the future, right? Like it will 100% happen in the future. Everybody knows this. So this is an incredibly dangerous precedent to set, because what it's really saying is that people with unpopular political opinions, or people even with political opinions that became unpopular over time, will now be retroactively, potentially, like, I guess you could say, discriminated against because of these actions. This is extremely scary. This is awful, because and everybody is going to say, oh, this is good because I disagree with what's happening here. Or, oh, that's good because I disagree with what's happening here. With something like January 6th, right? But here's the problem. Eventually it will happen to you. And if you create a foundation to have a rule set that will oppress people, the only thing you need to do in order for that rule set to be used to oppress you is wait. Because power always changes hands. I am amazed that people, and it's so disappointing to me that, I mean, to be honest, Kevin he's talking sense. I'm glad that he knows what he's talking about here. It seems like he does. But it's very disappointing to me that people have such low technological literacy and just logical thinking that they can't see what the conclusion of this is. I disagree with breaking the law, but not what your policies are. Companies have the right to choose who they hire. Companies do have the right to choose who they hire, but I think individuals have the right to privacy. And if these two rights converge, I think that individuals have a higher right to privacy than companies have a higher right to hiring. I think that the individual right to privacy is more important and should override that. And by the way, I don't even think it's close. And I think that you would agree with me if this happened in design. So like, for example, if somebody was hiring, if somebody hired, let's say, again, like 50 different detectives to walk around and follow you everywhere you go, monitor your conversations with everyone that you have, and, film you when you go home, when you go to bed, when you wake up, all of these things, what you eat, what you buy, everything. If somebody did that to you, you would want the government to stop them from doing that because it's stalking. So what I'm saying is that the type of surveillance that this creates indirectly creates that exact same effect. So really, whenever we're talking about the effect of it, it is the exact same thing. It's just that the design is different. Paparazzi? In my opinion, I think that if it was up to me, it would be illegal. It would be stalking. That's my opinion. It would be immediately stalking and it'd be illegal. Yeah, it just instantaneously. People have a right to privacy. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're a public figure, that doesn't mean that you don't have a right to privacy. That's not how things work. Sorry, but it's up to the employer. I think that you only say that because it's not happening to you and you're not envisioning a situation in which it does happen to you. That's the problem that people have, is that they celebrate these things whenever they happen to people that they disagree with, and they never can imagine the world where it happens to them.
I'll see your eyes at 4K resolution. I know who you are. And unfortunately, what's going to occur to these young people who have not thought this through, I'll see your resume. You may be a great candidate. Then I'll find that you were doing this or fighting the police or whatever.
Somebody says you're wrong. You don't have rights to privacy in public spaces. It'll be chaos if you had. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's apply some of this logic. Would you want a company to hire 50 different, and also, by the way, this happens all the time. And even inside of public spaces, like, for example, if you're filming somebody in a sexual way that makes them uncomfortable, they can absolutely tell you to leave. It's not even a question, and you can be charged for that. So there are totally expectations of privacy inside of public spaces. So just like on just a foundational level, that's not always true. It's harassment. So at a certain level, like if a company wanted to hire you and they hired 20 detectives to follow you around all of the time to every single place that you went to, would you think that's okay? If they're not interfering with my life, it is not harassing. But it clearly is interfering with your life because they're using the data that they're receiving in order to make decisions on you. But it's a private company decision, not talking about that? The private company decision is to invade your privacy. Do you think that you have a right to privacy? Your criminal history isn't privacy? Well, the reason why your criminal history isn't privacy is because the government says it's not. There's no actual rule for this. It's not like this is on the 10 Commandments or anything like that. They do that because, like, no, there are other, what are the question marks? What are you talking about? There are a lot of countries that don't let people just see your criminal history and they don't make it public. Yeah, what do you mean? Is that confusing? That's a fact. Well, that's dumb. No, it's not. This is my perspective. I think that if somebody is, and I think there's like maybe a couple of like super, super bad examples, like being like a, like pedo or something like that. But otherwise, if somebody is out of jail, they should be treated like a normal citizen. And if you're going to treat them like they're still a criminal, then keep them in jail.
It was, I'll put that resume on the left into the garbage because I know I can find someone else just as good as you, of which there are tens of thousands of candidates, that didn't participate in this. You are trashing your future. And look,
and isn't that scary? That's what's so scary to me about this, is like the concept that like basically these people are not able to express themselves or have any opinion or exercise their constitutional rights because companies collectively have created a pseudo-government apparatus that prevents them from employment if they engage in things that are completely legal and part of their First Amendment rights. This is a crazy overstep. And I'm sorry. I know there's some people that are defending it. You guys will learn. You think it might not be bad because it's not happening to you. This will only get worse. Here's a great example. Social credit. Yeah, let's think about the China social credit system. What's to stop? Wait a minute. We already have a social credit system, a soft one, which is your credit score. Imagine if that was applied to your entire life, and there was a company that was dictating and calculating this number that then companies would base everything off of. That would be very scary. Black Mirror. Okay. That could easily happen. Yeah, like it's so easy for that to happen. I think that's a great idea. Like if I was making a company, I would try to do that. They would make billions of dollars. Yeah, it does happen. I had a job. I lost a job because I had poor credit a few years ago. I'm sure.
I'm not against you protesting, but you must understand in today's economy with AI technology, you just killed your career. I feel sad for them. I really do.
I want to ask you.
I do too. And I think that like, and here's the problem is that like Kevin is probably arguing from a perspective of like, this is what's going to happen and I'm giving you advice to help you. But the truth is that the fact that this is a reality is extremely scary. It is like super fucking scary. And I think anybody who doesn't realize that is way too short-sighted. Like if he's saying that in perspective of like, hey, I'm trying to give people advice, this is what is the best option for you to take, that's fair, right? And that's good. But the fact that this is happening at all is extremely scary. Welcome to surveillance society. Yeah, it's a surveillance. It's insane. You always need to follow the rules, follow their rules. Yeah, exactly. And their rules, keep in mind, like these companies that create, like this is the problem with like, for example, social media platforms, is like all the social media platforms, especially in like during COVID times, were acting unilaterally. Like, for example, whenever Alex Jones got banned, he got banned off of every single social media platform at the same time. Why did that happen? It happened because they're making that decision to effectively unperson him as an individual on the internet. If you can't see that being a big problem, I'm sorry, but you're not thinking about it enough. That is horrible.
And first of all, and it's daunting. And really
and people celebrated it then. They did. They celebrated it because they didn't like Alex Jones. But it's not about any individual. And the truth is that, like, this is the same thing with, like, free speech. You know, like, free speech isn't being used to say, I like ice cream. The law is there as a tool to protect people that are saying things that are unpopular. It won't happen to regular people, though. Why wouldn't it? Think about why would it not happen?
Voting way you describe just how accessible the information really could be, and that people's anonymity, when they intend it to be anonymous, is compromised. But there are those who would probably have two reactions. One is maybe take your job and shove it. The priority is what I believe in terms of what I stand for. That might be one response. The other might be, well, hold on, I'm from a generation.
And by the way, I want to also say that in a lot of other countries, like I think that Japan and South Korea have a lot more laws protecting people's privacy in public places. So to say that this is an unsolvable problem that shouldn't even be approached is insane. This is a huge issue, and it will become a bigger problem every single year.
Me, I'm an 80s baby, but a generation where my whole life has been documented on social media. And so join the club. Add it to all the other things you're likely to find about me. It's unfair that you say you want me to protest and I get held accountable. Can either be reconciled?
Well, there's three.
I don't think that a company should have the right to hold people accountable for certain things, and they shouldn't be able to use that in decisions that they make for hiring. I think it's an overstep of an individual's personal privacy, and it's an overall bad thing. I can't see anybody arguing for the opposite and not seeing the unintended consequences that it creates. It might seem like a good idea whenever it's people that you think are breaking the law and you disagree with, but any tool like that will only be used and abused. And if you create a tool like that, it will be used for all kinds of things. It will be used for people that think that COVID isn't real. It'll be used for people that think the earth is flat. It'll be used for people that have the wrong political opinions. It'll be used for anything. Of course it would. It's only logical to assume that would happen because that's the way every single other tool in the entire history of the world has ever been used. It's like, what do we mean?
Three ways this affects you. Let's take the Google situation. You broke company policy, you got fired, you can sue Google. Good luck with that. You're not hireable.
More importantly, they also stopped working, and they did it on the company building. There were a lot of people that protested at Google who did not get fired because they were working and they did not trespass inside of the building and refused to leave whenever police ordered them to leave. This is a completely different situation.
Anymore.
You're referring to those who engaged in that sit-in, essentially,
during company time.
Employees from Google.
They were on the clock.
There were dozens of them. I should tell you about. There were dozens who were fired or placed on administrative leave because they were participating in employee sit-ins inside of some of the offices last month, and they have filed a complaint arguing that they had protected speech and that they were unlawfully fired. Go ahead.
It's fine. You can litigate till the cows come home. You're not going to get hired again. You have to understand you have an employment contract and you breached it.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, you broke the law. You're caught on a 4K security camera for the rest of your life. You're there. I'm sorry. You just didn't think it through. And I understand the passion when you're in your early 20s.
And the thing is that, like, again, Kevin is completely right. And he shouldn't be right, but he is. And I hope anybody that's going to do something like this takes this seriously. Because until there are laws to protect people's privacy and give people actual freedom of speech, then you should listen to what he's saying. You hate him because he's right? I don't hate him. Well, I think he's kind of a moron and other things. But I hate the fact that he's right. Does that make sense?
We're all there. I mean, everybody went through this. In college, you have passion. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But you got to think about your future when you're starting a family. Today, all of these people, tens of thousands of them, won't know why they didn't get that job, won't know why they can't join a board, or they couldn't get a loan, or they couldn't join a non-profit. It's because of...
I mean, like, think about what he's saying, though, right? It's like, so if the logic is because you can't do this, you can't get a loan, what is the outcome of people who do things that are disagreed with by banks, and then banks refuse to loan you money categorically because they're using a surveillance technology that can tell people where you are and what you think and what you're doing? This is a social credit score. This is a literal CCP, China, surveillance state, totalitarian social credit score. And it will happen. It's already happened on social media before. Am I like, do you guys see what I'm saying? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because so many people are disagreeing with me. Like, you guys see this, right? Like, we all see this?
What you did in the last 48 hours, I'm really sorry for them. And I teach at colleges and universities, and I tell these young students, we're in a new era of AI, high-resolution imagery. It is what it is.
I mean, I wonder what your opinion of it is. I mean, I know you've expressed the feeling sorry for them, but might that translate to, okay, and I'm not talking about people who have committed heinous acts and in the course of things, but there has been even a push for people who are returning citizens who have had felonies, and there was a push under the Obama administration not to have to check a box every time you
I completely agree with this, by the way. I completely agree that they should not have to check a box.
trying to return to society,
Yes.
having been promised an opportunity once rehabilitation occurs and all those
Just
different
shoot 'em.
deterrents
If you're going to do that, just shoot 'em.
that something will consistently hang over your head for the rest of your life. Might the sorrow you feel translate to a second opportunity to go beyond what has taken place in the last 48 hours or weeks?
I wish I could kumbaya with.
Somebody says, so no consequences? So whenever somebody's a felon, generally they go to jail. And whenever they're in jail, that's the consequence because they're in jail. And so they spend a period of time in jail. And then after they get out of jail, then they're no longer a threat to society, which is why they've been released from jail. So after they've been released from jail, and they're no longer a threat to society. Like, because what's the logic here? If they are still a threat to society, why are they out of jail? You see, like, because if they're still a threat, keep them in jail. That's what I would say. Most are repeat offenders. And do you want to know why a lot of people are repeat offenders? Because they can't assimilate back into the society. Because they've got a scarlet letter. They've got something that is a non-starter for employment in 90% of places. Duh. That's how it happens. I've seen it happen. Yeah, they're stuck on PvP mode. Yeah, yeah, they can't do dailies anymore. Death sentence, nay or yay or nay? I'm serious. Well, I like what I'm saying. Like it's an extra. Like I'm actually not a supporter of the death sentence. I'm not because it costs more money than keeping somebody in jail forever. It does because of like legal fees and everything. I didn't believe this. I learned about it, and you guys can too if you want to look into it. It does. It does. And I agree with the amount of protections people have from getting killed, right? Because you should have that. You should have the right to that. But I think the process of it is so it's so intensive that it's just simply not worth doing, right? And so appeals cost so much money. Yes, they do.
You on this, I really do.
No s'mores and roasted marshmallows for you and I.
Kumbaya.
For weeks.
I wish I could kumbaya with you on this. I really do.
No s'mores and roasted marshmallows for you and I, obviously.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Life is hard, then you die. So you really have to think about.
You know what? Maybe Kevin isn't so bad. I'm starting to like him. I'm really starting to like Kevin here. Yeah, this guy, he's all right.
About the decisions you make. And I urge young people today to understand the world they live in. There are hundreds of thousands of people competing for great jobs. And the minute you put yourself in this precarious position where you're filmed in AI, 4K, 1080p, forever,
he's being pragmatic.
for the rest of your life, you're tainted. I'm sorry. I feel the weight. I feel so bad for these people.
Yeah.
They have no idea what they're doing to their future. They are
looking for.
Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button. I think that he's completely right.
Put yourself in this precarious position where you're filmed in AI, 4K, 1080p, forever, for the rest of your life. You're tainted. I'm sorry. I feel the weight. I feel so.
Like, I think that nobody really understands how bad it's going to get. Nobody, I don't think, is seeing it. And that's what's scary to me about it. Because, like, the way I think it's going to go, there will be a company that will start creating a database and an aggregate of every single type of surveillance they can possibly have and creating human social credit scores. It's a great idea. Like, if I was trying to make a company, I would think to myself, oh, I should do this. Isn't there one already? Oh, yeah. China has that? No, they do. And just because we have it through the free market doesn't make it any better.
So bad for these people. They have no idea what they're doing to their future. They are tainting their personal brands forever.
But let me tell you what your colleague.
And I'm not against their passion.
I hear you, but I want just to read you. I know we have limited time, but I just wanted to read you a statement that your former fellow Shark Tank member Mark Cuban actually provided to our show. He said, "Business is like Dory. it quickly forgets what is inconvenient. This suggests in some respects that that there's more or less some bluster, and that if a business wanted to overlook something for its own corporate benefit or otherwise, if they wanted to lean into a movement or lean away from a movement, it's kind of their Bobby Brown prerogative. What's your reaction? By the way, Bobby Brown was a great R&B singer from the 90s.
I love this, and Mark can hire them all. It's just fantastic, because I won't be hiring any of them.
Really? Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear your perspective, and I think it's one that we have not heard as a different way to approach the consequences of what has happened. I do wonder, though, in the grand scheme of things, those who are as impassioned as we have obviously seen, and I'm not going to comment at the moment on the nature of where that passion's directed, whether they're thinking in the way that you are describing and thinking as a potential employer. Kevin O'Leary, nice to talk to you. Oh, go ahead. I knew you were going to have the last word.
And I will say this. No, listen. Tonight, let's kumbaya. Let's be proud of these people and their passions. You hire them. I won't. Thank you.
All right, well, there you go. No marshmallows happening in the CNN studio. Thank you, Kevin O'Leary.
This is very dangerous. This is a very, very dangerous thing. And the quote doesn't work because the forgotten ones will be protesters. It's not about the reason why I watch this is not because of protesters or not. It's because this is one of the first instances where, and this happened with January 6th as well, but I feel like there haven't been as many cases of it. And I think it's starting to happen a lot more, and especially since that was a few years ago, really. And AI has evolved so much since then. The truth is that the technology that people have to watch you and keep tabs on you is so advanced and so good, and it will just keep getting better, that people will lose any sense of privacy that they have, probably even inside of their own home. So if you don't make guardrails and protections for this now, you're going to have entire industries that will emerge. And this is already happening. He said there's it's $4,800, something like that, to do a check on somebody for an employment thing. There are already companies that this is happening for. And the fact that this is happening at all is extremely scary. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how bad it is. And I don't think Kevin does. Because, for example, if collectively all of the news places and everything decided that, Kevin wasn't able to, work in entertainment anymore because of his involvement with FTX, I bet he'd be complaining about, antitrust laws. He'd be wanting a breakup of a monopoly. He'd be wanting to talk about his freedom of speech. But the reason why he has that perspective is because he can afford to. It's because it's not happening to him. And this is what the problem is. And it's because people keep celebrating injustices happening to people that they don't like without realizing that the only thing that they have to do for those injustices to happen to them is wait. Because it will. It will happen to them. And when it does, then the worst part about it is that people's attention spans are so short, then the other side is going to be doing the same thing. It's crazy. Seriously, this tech doesn't exist? Well, I wonder why. So tell that to China. Tell that to China. One day will force us to wear helmets, and those will analyze and recap our whole life, make an estimated evaluation of if one is suited for the job or not, Minority Report. Yeah, maybe. As someone who owns several companies, would you hire people without checking criminal history? It's not about whether I would do it or not. See, you're not understanding the problem. The problem is not whether somebody wants to do it or not. It's whether somebody can do it or not. That's where the issue is. Do you understand? So, of course, people will take and use these tools if the tools are active. If you give people these tools, they will use them. Guaranteed they will use them. And that's the reason why it should not be allowed. That was a gotcha, by the way. Not necessarily. I'll accept that one. That one was fine. Yeah, Snowden exposed the government over 10 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Do we got cameras in stadiums that can zoom in through football fields in 4K? The tech does exist? Well, of course it does. Yeah, it's not even a question. I think it's a bit tad overboard to investigate the person fully. V's criminal record. Once crimes are committed, the other is straight up breaking privacy investigation. I would not work with someone who assaults people and ended up in jail. Well, so here's kind of like what the problem is, right? Is that whenever somebody assaults somebody and goes to jail for it, and then they get out of jail, what is that person supposed to do? I don't think that people should have that degree of choice. Die? Well, then shoot them, right? Or keep them in jail. But don't put them back into society, because I think that what happens is that people have this happen. They commit a crime, they go to jail, and then they get out of jail, and then they can't get another job. I would never hire anybody who's been speeding. Yeah, exactly. It's the most extreme response. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I always... So, and some people might think this is a bad way of doing things, but I actually think that extremes are a very good way to limit test an idea. Because if an idea doesn't work in an extreme, and it doesn't even work in like kind of like a moderate extreme, it's like, does it work in 99% of cases, 90% of cases, 50% of cases? Like, to what degree does this idea work? And I think that the closer that you get away from 100%, the less the idea works. So I actually think that extremes are a very, very good thing to base things off of. Yeah, limit test to reverse the idea then? Yeah, exactly. And I also want to say that, guys, I know there are some people who think that this is good and they think it's okay. I feel very bad for them because I know what's going to happen. And I think that a lot of people do. I think a lot of you guys, do you guys know what's going to happen? I'm not the only one, am I? Yeah. You're overreacting? Let's hope so.